Thank you for tuning in to Local SEO today. Don't forget to subscribe and share the episode. My guest today is entrepreneur, speaker, and author Ryan Vett. He launched his marketing firm at just 14, and in 2019, he launched Boon, a software application for the healthcare industry. Thanks for joining me today, Ryan.
Thanks so much for having me, John.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about your journey. If you don't mind just sharing a little bit about how you got started, why did you start such an early age, right? And how did you get started at that time?
Absolutely. Well, like you said, my first, what I would call real company, was at age 14. It was a marketing firm, and we had the opportunity to really work with nonprofits in about 25 different countries with over 200 clients. And I remember going down to the courthouse with my dad, and we had to sign paperwork to start the company, and he had to co-sign everything because as a 14-year-old, you have no legal right to do that. But really, it started before that. It started with a lemonade stand, and I joke, people think, that's what everyone's done, and it is true. But long story short, I tried to advertise my lemonade stand in the Chicago Tribune or Daily Herald, one of the Chicago newspapers, and found out that it was way outside of my budget for that full color back page ad that I wanted. It was like 50 grand a day or something like that. My lemonade stand had maybe 50 cents a day to market. So I did what any entrepreneur does, and I started my own newspaper. And that lasted a whole one or maybe two issues, wasted all my parents' computer paper and ink. But it did happen to land on the desk of someone who owned a local business, which is where I got into design at a young age. And that's why several years later, I opened up that marketing firm. So that's really how it truly started. And it was just the desire to make a positive change, make beautiful designs, make the best lemonade in town. And I was all about trying to figure out the best recipe. And it sounds funny, but that's kind of how I got my start.
So even beforehand, before that moment, I wanted to ask you, did your parents actually have businesses themselves, or how did you get into this kind of entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, I neither of my parents have businesses of their own. And I think I've always been encouraged to pursue that. If I ever wanted something, my parents would encourage me to figure out a way to get it in a constructive way. That wasn't like a punishment by any stretch, but it was challenging my imagination. And so that was definitely part of what inspired it. I think it's partly how I'm wired and how God made me. I think it's part of my DNA that I like to create things. I mean, I would sell anything. I got in trouble at school so many times for buying a pack of Orbit gum from Sam's Club. It was like 15 in a box, and it was like $7. So I'd sell them each for $1, and that's 50% margin. I got in trouble for that. I got in trouble for making school t-shirts with the school logo on it without permission from the booster club. And not that I was trying to do anything wrong. It's how you learn that there's laws and rules and things you have to abide by. So they were all good lessons. But, I always wanted to just create and sell, and not really to rip people off and make money, but I enjoyed the process of creating and imagining, and I had to make money off my ideas so I could do the next one.
That's awesome. So your upbringing, obviously your parents raised you to be curious, right? To be creative, to try different things. And I guess that's how you're molded, right? Today, do you have siblings? Do you have friends that are very like-minded as well? Do you surround yourself with people like that?
Yeah, I got a younger brother, and he and I actually have the privilege of working together on one of my endeavors, in one of my craft beverage lounges that I own with a partner. So that's fun. He has always worked with me on various projects that I've had, for better or for worse. Sometimes I think he enjoys that my crazy side there to start and try new things. And sometimes I think he tries to run away from it, which is probably the wiser of the two options. But he, I would also say, is very much driven, finishes things, takes risks, but his risks are very different. Like he hiked the whole Appalachian Trail and started out alone. And he met people along the way, but he had all intentions of through hiking by himself. So, it's that same sort of drive just manifesting itself in a different way. So that, to answer your first question about my siblings, I do have the younger brother. And then my friends, I grew up with friends that usually were my employees. For whatever side project I had, they would help me clean cars at the car wash, or sell lemonade with me, or I had a line of trading cards I called Pet Galaxy that I thought I could overtake Pokemon with back in the mid 90s. But so I didn't surround myself with people like that, but I usually brought them into it. Since then, I have a lot of friends who have no interests in business like I do. And I think that's very healthy to balance me out. And at the same time, I do have a community. I always say there's three people you need in life. Those that have gone before you, so mentors, those that you can run alongside with. Those are people who are in the same stage of life. Sometimes that's personally, sometimes that's financially, sometimes that's in business. So I surround myself with people in different categories there. And then people behind you in life that you can mentor, because I find, and so I'm an adjunct instructor. I have a couple high schoolers and college students that I mentor. And I find that when I talk to them or they ask me a question, I have to think about something I have not ever thought about, why I did that decision and whether it was the right one retrospectively.
That's awesome, man. And then in terms of like schooling, what did you study after high school, for instance?
After high school, I went to Elon University, and it just an incredible experience there. And I still have the opportunity to serve on the Entrepreneurship School's advisory board. Just a wonderful school, wonderful people. The best part about it wasn't the classes, and don't tell them I said that. But the reality is, and I think anyone would say, it's the college experience, right? It's the people you get to meet and interact with, and the things you have to do for the first time, and just managing your own schedule. And I had the advantage of doing a lot of that through businesses, but that was managing a business, and managing my personal life was not really something that I had learned. So I think that was huge. But I studied marketing. My degree's in it's a business administration degree with concentration in marketing, sales, and an unfinished minor in psychology, which I do regret not finishing. So that's what I did for undergrad. And then I've done, various programs here and there, not degrees, but certifications and things at Cornell and Harvard Business School and things like that over the years.
That's amazing. So after your schooling, what was your first kind of gig afterwards? Did you start running your own business, or did you actually work under someone?
Yeah. So through school, actually, I still had that first marketing firm. I ran that for about 12 years. So I had that even after school. I tried to wind it down multiple times, and there's just legacy clients, and they were all nonprofits, and saying no to a nonprofit that's doing good things is really challenging. So I would still service them, or have some of the legacy team members service them. So I had that all throughout college and undergrad. Right when I got to school, I started my first coffee shop in my dorm room. We had hours, we had menus, the whole 9 yards. That's how I paid for activities around school and being able to go on trips and things. So that was a side hustle, if you will. But I started my first, what I call dorm room startup, out of my dorm room. And I call it a dorm room startup, not because that was the classification, but because we had dorm room software that we sold to higher education institutions that had residential campuses. So if you lived on campus, our software could have been used. So that was my startup during school. Immediately after that, when I graduated, I did some consulting for a number of companies that were much larger. So outside of the software world, and did direct consulting with them. And as well as I did do a very brief stint of a consulting turned employment opportunity at a company running an e-commerce program that just basically did 90% of their revenue in the last 2 months of the year around Christmas. So did that, very short-lived for a number of reasons. And then that's when I launched my first coffee shop right after that. So that was all within like 2 years of graduating. There was a very busy time. I had my hand in probably more things than I should have, but I had the energy and the ability and bandwidth at that point in my life to be able to do that. And then I did go work for someone after that for about 5 years or 6 years. And that was a really good experience. I was able to be one of the first 3 people on the ground. So though I worked for someone, it felt like, the entrepreneurial journey, just with a little bit of structure and some guardrails and some great mentors in that really shaped most everything I know about modern day startups and fundraising, things like that. And just that whole lifestyle and cycle and what it takes.
Amazing, man. So tell us, what are you working on now?
Yeah. So right before we started this conversation, I was rushing to it. I'm working on finalizing um, the transition out of the company I launched back in 2018, 2019 was when we publicly launched it. And so that's a really exciting transition to see it move on to its next phase, and watch it kind of take its wings and fly. So I'm excited about that. And watching how its new lease on life and its new direction is really going to be beneficial, as it's going to be able to benefit so many sectors far more than I imagined. I originally thought we could only help healthcare, medical, dental, and veterinary. But where we're going, we're working on something so much bigger that's going to be able to impact uh, everything from services that you have around your house, to just so many different aspects of life. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm also, I mean, I'm involved in a lot of things, but the things that are taking up my time, that as well as working with a company called New Chip, that is based out of Austin. It's an accelerator, and they work with startups, helping them learn what it means to be a startup. So if you've got $50,000 in money in or revenue, and you're just trying to figure out, like, I don't know how to approach an angel. I asked all my friends and family and shook them for their pennies, right? But what does a financial model look like, or due diligence, or a data room, or the right pitch deck? So all the way from seed or pre-seed companies, really all the way through Series A, and really helping them connect with investors. And again, one of the things I mentioned a minute ago, who I keep in my life, I keep people that I run alongside, running mates that are in the same stage. Well, New Chip allows you to connect with other founders that are similar to you, and just hold you accountable. And sometimes being a founder can be lonely. Most people don't get the ups and the downs. I mean, when you go to investors and VCs, literally thousands of times, and you hear no, 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 or your idea's foolish, or have you seen these other 50 companies that have tried and failed, or your valuation's out of this world. And so just having some people to talk to can be really beneficial.
That's amazing, man. It sounds like you're having so much fun, or you're enjoying at least the process, right? Because there's a lot going on in this, especially angel VC world, right? And
Yes.
guiding through that, like I dabbled in it. For me, it was more about just the investment side, but for me, it was like I didn't have time because it's very
Right.
time consuming, right? Like vetting all these pitches and trying to just stay on top of it and do due diligence, right? Like you have no time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that you're in it. And in terms of like mentors and coaches and people that you actually surround yourself with, you mentioned a couple good key things where you basically try to have people that have succeeded, the ones that are living presently and the ones that are kind of just starting off, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how did you go about surrounding yourself with those type of people, and how did you pick them?
Yeah, what's interesting is if you look at millennials, which I'm a millennial. I don't know. I still haven't decided if I'm a proud millennial or not, but I'm a millennial, and I can't help when I was born. Millennials actually are the generation out of all of history since the 1900s, with this beginning of 1900s, since the silent generation, that actually want mentors more than any other generation. However, they are the least likely generation to have a mentor. And the reason being is older generations think millennials are crazy, which we probably have a dose of that. That's probably half fair, maybe a quarter fair. But the other half of it is the millennials unwilling to ask. And so I think when I look for a mentor, it's someone maybe who's gone down the same path as I have, especially if it's a career mentor. But for a life mentor, it's someone that I have seen live a life well that I want to emulate. And for me, that has a number of components, including faith-based components is a big one for me. They don't have to be successful at business or even successful in their career, but just have to, I want to see someone who's led a family well, as I'm a newer dad and been married for a number of years now. But those are things that, have their own challenges outside of the workplace. And if some people just invest all their time into work and don't have a healthy balance, which hurts their family, some people just don't know how that balances out. And so I think finding people that align with your life, where you're at and where you're trying to go, is important. You can always find business mentors to teach you things, but I think what I'd call more of a life mentor, if that's even a thing, not quite a life coach, but someone that can just do life and ask you the hard questions, and make sure that you're on track.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because those are things that you want to focus on in the greater scheme of life, right? In terms of like surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals, not just for business, because people are so focused on like money and career aspirations, but they forget about what's truly important. What do you want out of life in terms of the next 40, 50, 60 years, right? And
Yep.
is it family? Is it taking care of your significant other, children, friends, travel, enjoying what you have, right? Be grateful. A lot of people
Yeah.
forget about all these other things, especially, and I think during this pandemic, a lot of people realize what truly is important, right? And that's hopefully going to allow people to be less focused on chasing things,
Right.
stuff that really doesn't really matter at the end of the game, right? Like really what do people want? They want to be surrounded with people they really want to be with, right? Which is strong
Right.
relationships. Talk to real people with real connection, right? Yeah, I love that. And then in terms of like challenges, I guess you've probably encountered tons of them over the years. Can you think of a couple of them that maybe mistakes or challenges that you kind of overcame, and how did you go about fixing the problem?
Yeah, there's so many challenges. I think most entrepreneurs, and I won't speak for all entrepreneurs, but most business people that have had some outward measure of success have a mountain of failures that's 10 times higher than any success that people see. It's kind of the iceberg effect, right? And I think not being afraid of failures or those challenges, that's what sets people apart from being able to move forward. And it doesn't mean that they don't get you down, or they don't slow you down, or they don't hurt or leave scars, because they do. And I think, those are okay. Just depends how you deal with them. So when I think of some of the biggest challenges, I mean, I can talk about a lot of different obstacles I've had to overcome. But looking back at all of them, if I were to categorize maybe one of the biggest challenges I had, is really understanding that everything you do in business is not about the dollar. It's not about profit. It's about people. And people say that, and they might mean it. But for me, it really became true when, every time you leave a company, or you start a new company, or you sell a company, or buy a company, whatever it is, you're inheriting people. There might be cash flow, there might be assets, there might be other things, but you're inheriting people, or you're encouraging people to move on. And one of the things that I've been challenged with in the last probably 7 to 10 years is anyone that interacts with me better off because they were on my team or part of my company, or I invested in them than they were before. And then the first question people always ask is, well, have you ever fired someone? Yes, I have. And unfortunately, that's just the nature that, sometimes it has to take for different reasons. Each case is very different. And those are challenges, but how can you still do that well and in a loving way that's investing in people? So back to your question with the challenges, I think my biggest challenges have come when I forget that people are the priority, because without people, you don't really have the profits, right? You don't have people to buy your products nor make your products or sell your services. So, the biggest things, and I can think of some moments or some people that, there were moments where I did not put people first. And that's ultimately, I can trace failures back to those moments almost every time. There's very few times when not putting people first led to, I said a double negative there. So let me rephrase. There's very few times I can think of where I failed, where I had put someone first.
Mm. I loved how you talk about people, because I'm all about relationships, and I hire slow and I fire fast, right? And I want to make sure that they're a good fit and they are in alignment with values, right? And the challenge is when you inherit people and their traits and their skill set, it's hard because you basically have to absorb them and figure out if they're going to be in alignment with your future goals, right? Endeavors. So when you have something that is clear, your vision, right, and they're not in alignment, then you have to go seek out real people that really fits that mold, right? And that's the challenge. A lot of people this is their livelihood. This is it for them. And for you to say, you have to move on, it's hard. You got to show some empathy. You got to really feel where they're coming from, but they have to also look at why you're doing it, right? It's just not a good fit. So
Yeah.
I totally get where you're coming from, but for me, it's like I'm just one owner, and I only hire good people and they stick, right? And that's more important. For you as an angel investor or a serial entrepreneur, it's a little bit different because you're running it for different purposes, right? Because there's other people invested in this project and you got to dictate to them, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of like, I know you mentioned about some of the challenges and failures. Is there any advice you would give anyone that's kind of starting off this journey, either side hustling, freelancing to becoming more of a, I don't know, business owner, SaaS company, anything that's trying to get angel investing, your expertise, what would you give them in terms of advice?
Yeah, if you're trying to raise money, specifically, and that's kind of the course you're on, there people fall in one of two camps. Some people are fine with giving away the whole farm to get a little bit of cash in, and some people are like, no, I'm going to give like one millionth of a percentage of my companies, and I want $10 million for that one millionth of a percentage. To both of those people, I would just say know what you want in the long scheme, in the long run. If you're trying to make a ton of money and you want to retain as much ownership of your company as possible, that's fine. But also be willing and realize, especially if you're a first-time founder, that investors are going to need this security blanket for what they're putting in, for the cash they're putting in. And probably chances are that they know far more than you do. In fact, if you're getting investors that don't know more than you do, especially in that stage where it's a true angel and their money is one of the only monies in, you want to lean on them. I think as founders, especially younger founders, and I don't want to put all of them in a box, but I was one of them. So I'll speak as a younger founder. It's easy to be arrogant, especially when you've hit a little bit of what the world would call success, whether you've had a high paying salary or you've had an exit or whatever it might be. It's really easy to not be teachable and arrogant. And I would say back to your challenges question a little bit ago, or obstacles. I think I am often my biggest obstacle, especially when I was younger. I was always right. I did not take advice very well because I thankfully I had made some good decisions that looked really good. So I'd always fall back on the couple successes I had and characterize that by everything that I knew. And the older I get, I was just talking to one of my buddies this weekend and we were sitting around a fire and I was like, I feel stupider every day. And I've never had more education. I've never read more books. I've never been more in tune with learning. And I feel more and more dumb every morning when I wake up. And I think that's probably a good place to be to some extent, because it means that you realize that you don't know everything. And so I think that's also both whether you're raising money and seeking investors or another obstacle. That's a big one. I would also say don't take an investor's criticism lightly, but don't build your whole company around it. I've seen people pivot their companies every single time they have a meeting, and every investor has their own life view, right? They have their different experiences, different philosophies. So don't change your pitch deck every single time you talk to an investor. I've seen too many companies do that, and you're not going to raise money. Stay true to what you know, but also be willing to change and be open. If you hear the same thing 4 times, you probably are doing something wrong or headed down a wrong path. If you hear 4 different things 4 different times, take the value out of all of it, because I believe all advice is valuable. And then everything else, just stick to kind of your true north.
Oh yeah, I love all those things, because staying grounded, understanding that you are just, you're just starting off, right? There's way more people ultra successful, even though you think you achieve success, and what does success mean to you is completely different than someone else that maybe is, 1,000 times more successful than you, right? Yep. Not just money wise, but like life wise, right? Because success means so many things and for so many different people, right?
Yeah.
So I love that fact. And then in terms of just being, just grateful for what you have, right? Like at least you have the ability to start a business, right? And go out and try to raise money. I would even say, like, if there's a way to cater some of the messaging to who the angels are, right? Do your due
Mhm.
diligence, find out their strength, and then cater a presentation to them to then allow for you to have more of an advantage, right? So do as much homework. Don't try to do the same pitch all the time.
Yep.
Be prepared. This is sales in you, right? Like for me, I'm always trying to think in the head of whoever I'm going to present to and try to understand who they are, what their pros, cons, personality traits are, where they reside, what they're looking for, and answer the questions, right? That's
Yeah.
what I would do if I'm pitching.
Being prepared is so important. Two stories come to mind real quick. One, an interview I had literally earlier today with someone for a company. I was trying to help hire some key employees. I said, so what's your favorite part about, I'll just call it Company X. What's your favorite part about Company X? And they're like, oh, that they do these cool things. And it was like very generic. So I kept probing. They had no idea. I was like, they should at least be on their, if they didn't do their research, they should at least be on their computer since it was a phone interview and pulling up things on the website. That was one. The more surprising one was a large, very well-known, if I said the name, you'd probably know, leader of organization called a meeting with me, and he had an agenda, which was fine, and I was on board with the agenda. But we'd never met before. We were not friends. And so I sit down with him, and I'm basically getting the feeling that he didn't even go to LinkedIn or Google. I mean, if you Google me, you can find at least one interesting fact, not too hard. You don't even have to click a link. And that's fine, but knew nothing. He called the meeting because he knew I had something he wanted, and that was it. And so that was, I mean, he, with an assistant, and sometimes when I leverage assistants or use like the service magic, I'll have them do executive bios on people real quick and find, if there's a recent Instagram picture that they were in Cancun, like I'll mention that. And exactly. It's amazing what you can find in 30 seconds about someone. So just being prepared to go back with what you said, John. I mean, that's critical.
And I feel like there's a lot of people like that are takers in life, right? Yeah. And I don't know if you read this book by Adam Grant, Giver to Taker. And, the ones that are actually ultra successful are the ones that actually care, that are givers, yes. Right? And I feel, in politics, in business, in your social circle, who do you want to surround yourself with, right? People that are always grabbing things and never giving anything of value, but they want things all the time. Do you want to surround yourself with those kind of people? Or do you want to actually help people that actually are empathetic, right? Wants to share and give and help, right? That's life in general though, right? But it says a lot about you if you surround yourself with all these other takers as well, right? You're the average of the 5 or most people that you spend the most time with, right? So
yes, very true.
So in terms of like technology, I know we only have a couple other questions I want to ask you. How has that helped you scale, grow some of your companies in this VC world?
I love technology, probably to a fault. I would say I'll give you the advice where I failed before I get into answering your question. Find the 1 or 2 tools that make you most successful and stick with them. Not that you can't find better tools. I have an account with probably every single new tool that's ever come out for fundraising or anything else. And that's not always the best because then I lose things across platform. So I think my best advice is technology makes it really easy to keep organized and search. I mean, whether you're using Google Sheets or Excel or Evernote as something that I would call not technology designed for fundraising, or you're using one of the many systems out there that can automate or help you do that. I would just say, just stick with one and stay organized. I think the other part of it is there is a lot of automation software out there. And I probably get, I don't even know how many dozens of emails and LinkedIn requests daily from people that I've never met. And they are asking for money, which is fine. I mean, that's sort of assumed. If you put investor on anything online, that's going, all of a sudden the magnets are going to come. So it's not a complaint, but it's like, hey, I'm raising money. Can you invest in my company? It's like, at least just be careful with automation software. It's you might catch 1 or 2 people with that, but if you really want someone to write a check that's meaningful, specifically when it comes to fundraising, like we were talking about 30 seconds ago, personalize it. Get to know the person. Say, hey, I saw you went to this school, or hey, I just saw you voted for, or we're on this trip, or, you root for this team, or whatever it might be. And just make that connection personal.
Yeah, there's too many automation softwares and people rely on it to think it's going to actually help them get real appointments, real connections,
Yeah.
real relationships, right? But in reality, if you actually just join a community, get to know
Mm-hmm.
people, reach out, do your due diligence, personalize, right? That 30 seconds will have you way more success than weeks or, thousands of outreach that is not
Absolutely.
personal, right? Because
Absolutely.
you, me, people that are busy, we want to connect with people that actually resonate, which is
Right.
someone that actually did due diligence. Like, we're not stupid people, right? Like, we
Right.
actually understand how difficult it is for people to reach out to us. Let's be honest. Like, I only want to surround myself with people that actually matter, right? So
Yeah.
what are you bring to the table that brings value for me or my audience or whatever it is? If it doesn't,
Exactly.
then maybe it's not a good fit, right?
Exactly. And I would say I actually leverage automation sometimes, especially when I'm fundraising, when I have to do rapid follow-ups in particular, or send out investor emails, things like that. I'll try to use personalization automation, just personalize it and make sure your
Yeah.
personalizations are correct.
Yeah.
That's another big one. It's a big marketing fail if you wanted a challenge or obstacle I had to overcome. I had a list. I was VP of marketing at a company probably 6 years ago now. And we sent out a list to, I don't know, 17 to 20,000 people. And the columns were off by one. So everyone got the wrong email. And that was just absolutely unacceptable. But yeah, so use automation correctly. All that to say, we
So
redeemed it.
you got to check. Yeah, oh yeah. So all these little tools are great, but you got to make sure you test it. You got to vet it. You got to personalize and make sure that it feels like someone's going to open it. It's all about click-through rate, open rate, and you got to understand what these tools ultimately can do. Save you a lot of time, but if it's not effective, then what's the
Yeah.
point, right?
Yeah.
I would rather have someone manually do it if the conversion rate is a lot higher than automation, right?
Right. Right.
Anyways, so right now, what drives you? Because it seems like you've been doing a lot of different things. You're exiting right now on one project. You're an angel for others, and you're still in this VC world and fundraising. So, what are your kind of near goals, vision, and missions, and the next 5 years, for instance?
Yeah. So my mission hasn't changed in over like 15 years. And I wrote it at a conference a long time ago. And it was the idea to inspire others towards a positive change. And that hasn't really changed ever. It's evolved in how it's applied, whether that's inspiring people personally, professionally, help through a company, through a brand, whatever that might be. And so my overarching life goal is that, just to inspire others towards a positive change. So my current role at New Chip, we train startups how to be better and help them get from launch to exit. And so that's a way that our curriculum, our tools can help inspire those founders who, if they're not struggling yet with fundraising, they will at some point. We can help inspire them. So every decision I make, every step I take, I try to follow that in my life. At this point, I'm just having fun, and any opportunity that comes my way, I'll at least say yes. I'll have a conversation. And that's just something I enjoy doing. You never know whether that's a big thing or a small thing here or there. Any opportunity that seems like it aligns with that mission. Let me qualify that. I definitely pursue. I always keep my hobbies going. So I love craft beverages, coffee, beer, tea, wine, whiskey, cocktails, you name it. Wine in particular, I'm a sommelier. I own a couple wine bars with a partner of mine. So, that's something I'll always keep doing, and probably you'll see a couple more pop up over my lifetime as just a side project. But other than that, it just kind of going and pursuing that mission and putting people first, because, I'm to the point where I'm not trying to, I've achieved what I feel like I wanted to achieve from a, fight and do this and grind. Now I just want to have fun and work and hopefully apply some of the things I've learned to help others.
That's awesome, man. I love that attitude. It seems like you're living life. You're enjoying the process, the journey. And last kind of question I wanted to ask you, pillars right now, it seems like your career is in good standing. What about family, health, community, and others? What's really important for you?
Yeah. So my first uh, priority. So pillar, you can call them pillars if you want. I look at them a little bit as priority. So one in front of another. But first for me is my faith. That is the most important thing. It takes precedent over anything else that I do. I'm not traveling as much as I did. I was on the road weekly, but it was always a priority to be home on the weekends. And that was just something that I'd committed because number two was my wife. Three is my family. And then everything else kind of falls below that. And before business, which is number five, number four would be people and friends and acquaintances, then five would be business. And that's when I find my priorities are aligned, or if you want to use the pillar analogy, when your pillars are standing up straight and not tilted one way or another, even, a quarter inch at the bottom, look at the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? It doesn't take a lot to offset it. When everything's aligned, or for me in that sequence, in that order, things go really, really well. And I can tell you, it takes one day to get a little off kilter, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you're building this kind of course that's leaning. And it doesn't take long, especially when you're busy. I just came off a trip where I did, and I used to be able to do it all the time, but it was 3 18-hour days in a row. Leave at 3 a.m. on a plane, do 18-hour days, 3 days in a row, and come back, at 1 a.m. That those types of scenarios really get you off kilter. And not that good things don't happen, but if you don't kind of reset and rest, and I think that's the other big thing I've learned recently, before COVID, but I think a lot of people have been learning it in COVID, and it's a valuable lesson, is we need to rest as human beings. And it doesn't mean be lazy. I think there's a big difference there. But sometimes we just need to take time to pause. And that's why I like mentoring as well, because when you reflect on what you've done, even if you're with somebody else, you're still pausing, right? You're pausing from moving forward, and you're reflecting on what you've done, and you're able to share the good, bad, and usually the ugly with your mentee.
That's awesome, man. It sounds like you're just, being positive, right? Present now, because when you're running, and it seemed like the last couple of years you were, but during this pandemic, it allowed you to really reflect and figure out what's truly important, why you're doing this, right? And being grateful. I think once you kind of figure out why you're doing things, the main purpose of it all, then you'll actually live a happier, more fulfilled life. And you'll wake up and energized, you'll sleep better because you'll have more clarity, right?
Yeah.
But without that in mind, like, people are just chasing. They're, trying to figure out what's next. How am I gonna make the next jump or a career move, or buy
Right.
my next car or whatever it is, right? So you just gotta slow down and figure out like why ultimately. So I love that. So I really appreciate all our discussions, Ryan. How can some of our listeners get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having me. I'm pretty easy to find online, good, bad, or not. Just search Ryan Vet in Google. You'll find my website. All my social profiles are Ryan C. Vet. And pretty much, like I said, I collect accounts. So yeah, even some of the more obscure social media channels, I probably do have them. Might not be active on them, but yeah. So Ryan C. Vet on any Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And then ryanvet.com or anywhere else online. I'm sure you can find resources, books. Came out with a book last year called Cracking the Millennial Code on the generations, and have another one in the works coming out late 2021. So it's still a ways away, but called The $1 Million Lemonade Stand.
There you go. That's awesome, man. I'm looking forward to that book. Well, thanks a lot, Ryan. It was a lot of fun. So thanks all the listeners for joining us today, and please subscribe. And thanks a lot, Ryan, for being on our show. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
So the team will kind of do the final edits. Um, Thanks a lot, man. It was
Yeah,
good.
absolutely.
Enjoyed it. Hopefully you had fun. It was
Yeah, it
just
was
for
good.
me, it's probably going to take a couple weeks. I don't know how backlog we are, but
Yeah.
our team does the edits and then we'll post it. We'll let you know when it's live. If you're ever in Toronto, let me know. I don't
Okay.
know. All the borders are closed right now. It's going to be
Yeah.
closed for a while, I believe.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't been up there this year, and I don't think I will be for a little while, unfortunately. But
Yeah, it's all
yeah.
good though. At least you got your wife and your family nearby, and that's more
Mhm.
important, right? Let's travel. Figure
Yeah,
out
definitely
why
less
you're
travel.
doing things, right?
Yeah.
So,
Um, if you send over social graphics or anything too, whenever the episode goes live, I'll post it.
okay.
So happy to do that.
I'll get Kayla to send everything over
Okay.
once we're ready. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks a lot,
Awesome.
Ryan. I'll talk to
Yep.
you
Thank
later.
you. Take care. Bye
All
bye.
right, see ya. Bye.